Hi, and welcome to Creating a Life You Love with Adriana, where we talk about all things mental, spiritual, emotional health, and just how to create a healthy lifestyle centered on the Lord. Whether you are single, going through a breakup, in a relationship, whatever it may be, we've covered it all. And I've talked a lot about relationships the past 8 months, specifically how my husband went from breaking up to getting married. You guys have been pretty interested in that. So I've gone into detail on how to get through breakups and all the things. And keeping on that theme, which it may seem like I'm not, but I am, today we're talking about something that really only showed up in my life during my breakup. Like that was the breaking point in my relationship with God where I realized, okay, I need to go deeper. And during my breakup is when I realized that there were so many feelings that I was just pushing down. Um, and didn't really have a moment to like address because I was just like, go, go, go. I was doing school. I was working out twice a day. I had work and I was just so busy. And then I had a boyfriend on top of that. And I didn't really have like a moment to just sit with my thoughts and be like, you know what? This is what I'm feeling. And I was on this journey of like living a healthy lifestyle, self-improvement. So every day I would wake up, I would name things that I was grateful for. I would read a few verses in scripture, maybe I would pray a little bit, but it was always in like this very rushed way. And like I said, I kind of just kept shoving feelings down, shoving emotions down. And so when I look back to that time now, for a moment, I almost think like, oh, I didn't really have very many problems. Like when I first started my relationship with God, like everything was like pretty smooth sailing. But then I forget that I had shoved my feelings down for so long and didn't address them. So it seems like everything was a-okay. But then I would have these like kind of spirals, and you'd see in my journal of like, wow, I didn't know I was feeling this, this, and this. And it was just crazy to kind of see like the buildup. And now I'm dealing with the repercussions of, okay, I didn't spend time addressing what I was feeling. And now I'm having to go back and like work through these things. Anyway, all of this to say, I hadn't learned yet that I needed to have time where I could just be with God without any distractions, without my phone, without even podcasts. And I just needed to be with the Lord. And ironically, the only time that I had moments of silence were really in the shower. And you always hear of shower thoughts, like you have your best thoughts in the shower, like your most creative ideas in the shower. And I really think that's because we don't have any distractions in the shower. Like you're doing this almost monotonous task of like washing your hair, washing your body, and you're just allowed the ability to have nothing around you to distract you unless you bring your phone in the shower, which I'm guilty of, like trying to answer a few texts in the shower. It just doesn't really work very well. But anyway, so yeah, that was really the only experience I had had with silence and solitude. And maybe you have no clue what I'm talking about. Maybe you've already listened to a few podcasts on this spiritual discipline, because this is a spiritual discipline. And so today I'm going to get into that. I'm going to just explain how it's benefited my life, how you can put it into your life. But I think the whole idea of silence and solitude, just to kind of like give you an idea of what the heck this is, um, solitude is choosing to be alone with God without noise, without distraction. It's not spending time isolating yourself and not spending time around people. It's intentionally withdrawing from the world for a period of time so that you can go back out almost a better version of yourself. And then silence can go hand in hand with that. It's not the same thing, but silence isn't just a lack of sound externally. It's not just the removal of distractions externally. It's the quieting of the inner noises, your inner thoughts, and the ability to just kind of quiet your mind and just listen to what the Lord may be telling you. So, anyway, that's a little bit of a description. Going back to my breakup. So, I go through my breakup. Well, Christopher, he breaks up with me. He's like, you know what? I think we need some time just apart. Actually, that's not how it went. He said, we're going to break up and this is going to be an indefinite breakup unless the Lord says otherwise. So it wasn't like we had space or like a break or anything. It was a true breakup. And at that moment, I was very upset, obviously, but I had this, like, strong desire instead of, binge watching TV, instead of eating my feelings, I just wanted to spend time with the Lord, and it was like this new desire was kind of, like, boiling up in me of, like, I want to learn about the Lord. I want to spend time with him. I want to learn about the Bible. I want to encounter him in a deeper way, not just this surface level way where I was waking up, thanking God for the things in my life and then going about my day. I wanted like a deep relationship with him. So, the first few weeks of my breakup, I would wake up every morning. I would spend time with God. I would pray. I would pray for so long that I would fall asleep during my prayers because it was also pretty early in the morning. So I'd be like praying on my knees and then I'd like drift off to sleep. And let me tell you, in the moments where I was like drifting off into sleep, where I was kind of in between a state of like reality and then like dreaming, I had the most amazing, not conversation with God, but like the things that the Lord revealed to me when my mind was so quiet, it was just wonderful. And so I have so many stories. I've definitely shared them on the podcast sporadically here and there. And so that's not the point of this episode, but it was just my first experience with completely quieting my mind, where all of a sudden I was just having the Lord kind of speak to me in ways that I didn't really know. And if you're confused on what I'm talking about, I did a few episodes, I think maybe a few weeks back, on how to listen to the Lord's voice. And I did talk about silence and solitude in that, but I wanted to go more into that today. Um, but yeah, that was really the breaking point. The breakup was the breaking point of me having this time of like not being rushed and just setting aside time to be with God. And that was really beautiful. I encountered this kind of love for silence and solitude. And I realized that I had not made time to be with the Lord in the way that I thought I had. I feel like on social media now, we can kind of romanticize our time with God. We have our little Bible out with our little like highlights and our cute pens and like our coffee and all of that. And that's all great. But we also need to just embrace the moments where it's like, okay, I have 5 minutes between work. What am I going to do? I'm going to sit in silence. I'm going to think about the Lord. I'm going to think about how I'm feeling. How am I physically feeling? What do I feel in my body right now? Anyway, I'll go into that in a second. But yeah, the breakup after during that time, I really just loved being with God. And I almost and I feel like something amazing that comes from silence and solitude is that you realize that the Lord loves you even when you're not doing anything. I think Christianity can almost become this works-based religion even though it's not, and the Lord says you are saved by faith, not through works. It talks about that in Ephesians 2 8 through 9. So I feel like it's this reinforcement of like, I'm just sitting with the Lord, not even doing anything. And that's okay because this is not a works based religion. This is not this check off box that I have to do of, oh, read a chapter a day in my Bible. Oh, I prayed and said 5 things I was grateful for. Like those can help, those can structure. But I think we need to actually sometimes put those aside in our mind and get rid of like this to-do list and instead just sit with the Lord. Because I've definitely treated God like a just thing to check off my list. And it's almost been like, oh, if I can read this much of the Bible, I'll be productive. And I've almost treated like sitting in silence as unproductive or not doing anything as unproductive. And this couldn't be further from the truth. What silence and solitude allows is God to speak to us, number one, but it also allows us to understand ourselves. It allows us to understand the depths of ourselves, the parts that we've been shoving down inside. And it also allows us to step away from the noise of our world. In last podcast episode, I did touch on like being in the silence, being in solitude is so important, especially when we are just bombarded with the chaos of this world. And I found myself kind of gravitating towards like wanting to know what's going on in the world and like checking my phone every few minutes to try to see like what's happening. And that's just not healthy. We weren't made to have essentially the world at our fingertips and know what's going on 24/7. And I feel like that's been my biggest struggle with setting aside time to be alone with God is quieting all of the things that I've seen throughout the day, throughout the week in my mind. And I just kind of wanted to be honest about that because I feel like maybe I'm not alone in that. But yeah, just like this morning, I quiet my mind, right? I remove all distractions. I put my phone away, I put my book away, and I just close my eyes and I have my, hands open and I am just taking deep breaths and all I can think about is, oh, remember this video that you watched, or remember this podcast that you listened to, or remember this picture that you came across, or remember this article, and like all of these things, it's like my brain hasn't fully had time to process the amount of information that I've seen, that it's using this time of like silence to do that. And throughout the night, when you're sleeping, your brain is constantly working and sorting information, and honestly, maybe that's why we wake up so tired, even though we get sleep. We wake up so tired. I mean, at least for me, because our brain is just having so much information, having to sort through so much throughout the day. I don't really know. Maybe this isn't scientific, but I'm just thinking out loud here. There's just so many things that like I come across on a daily basis that I feel like is just overwhelming. And so that's been the hardest part of for me. I can remove all the distractions externally, but internally, it's not so easy. And so, um, if you've been following along here for a little while, you know that I've mentioned a resource called Practicing the Way. And this organization, they have spiritual disciplines um, that they go over, and they talk about prayer, fasting, scripture, silence and solitude, and all these things to help you to learn how to be like Jesus, because obviously in our modern world, things are so different than they were in the Bible, in biblical times, right? And so we're having to navigate and do what Jesus did, but in our time. So, anyway, Practicing the Way, this organization helps you do that. I will put their organization and the practice below, because silence and solitude is a practice that they actually cover. So if you want to go more in depth on this, definitely check that out. But what was I saying? Oh, I don't even remember what I was saying. Oh, yes. Practicing the way. They say that you can remove external distractions, but it's the internal distractions that's a little bit more difficult. It's the internal voice that is a little bit more difficult to remove. And so what I have found is the more information that I've been consuming, the harder it is to settle my mind. If I am completely removed, if I am, consuming, I have been scrolling on social media. I have just been having so many, like listening to five different podcasts within an hour. Um, and I try to get in silence, my brain will take a lot longer, maybe like 10 minutes to finally enjoy sitting in the silence, because it's definitely hard. It's not easy when you first start. Your mind is going to want to do something. And so when I sit down and close my eyes, I immediately want to open my eyes and like start picking my hair or picking my nails or doing something, because I can't sit still. And so that's been my biggest struggle. To go along with that though is the feeling that sitting in solitude and silence is not productive. That also drives me nuts. So, like I just said earlier, it is productive because it allows you to rest so that you can go out and do other things that are also considered productive. Um, but in my mind, for some reason, like it is so hard to think sometimes about nothing. It is so hard to just sit down and do nothing when I see there's dishes, or I want to make, Christopher coffee. And I'm very much so like, I think I like doing little acts of service for Christopher. That's happens to be my love language, people doing things for me. And so I want to make his coffee. I want to make his breakfast. But I know that I have to sit in the silence, or else I'm going to just have like this rushing kind of mentality throughout the day. So first thing in the morning, that's something I've had to do. But the third thing that has also prevented me from being in the silence, being in the solitude more or less than I would like is the fear of encountering my emotions. And this is something that I mentioned earlier, where if I think about how I was a few years ago, I first, to kind of give you an overview, if you don't know, in 2020 is where I kind of was introduced to this idea of self-improvement, reading, self-help books, and this idea of like you have the power to change your life, right? And with that, I kind of started gravitating towards learning more about Christianity and God because I was raised Christian. And so I was coming back to that after kind of straying away for a little while. And so I would say in 2020, 2021, maybe 2022 as well, I had like this very surface level relationship with God. And when I look back to those times, I think very fondly of it because I'm like, wow, I really didn't have many problems. Like life was really good. Why was my life better then? And now I feel like I struggle more. I'm not really talking about like struggles and trials, like outwardly, like circumstances in life. I'm more so talking about my mental state, how it seemed like I was much better then than I am now. But then I kind of laugh and but then I was like laughing. I'm like, that's actually not true. I just wasn't very aware of my emotions. And so now I have noticed that I kind of have this fear of like encountering my true self because when you're on go, 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 you don't really have a moment to think about, okay, how am I feeling? How am I feeling about this? Why am I responding this way? You're just like getting your work done. You're, recording a podcast. You're, on social media. Like you don't have time to think. And so the fear of being confronted with your thoughts that has kind of prevented me from being alone with God. Obviously we're always with God, but like I said, silence and solitude, that's like a whole different thing where you are intentionally making that time to just sit with God, sit with your emotions. And I've also had a fear of being lonely in the silence and solitude, which there is a difference between being alone and feeling lonely. And it's really all in how you frame it. You can feel lonely in a room full of people, but when you're alone, maybe you don't feel lonely. So it's like just a completely different, it completely depends on just the way you see things and your perspective of that. But I've had to help reassure myself that I am not alone and that I am with the Lord and that it is so important to confront my emotions and how I'm feeling at the fore end. Wait, is it called the forehand? I don't even know how to pronounce it. At the forefront? Yeah, at the forefront rather than at the end where I've, blew up and I got upset. And, that's because I wasn't spending time with the Lord in silence. So yeah, those are the three things that I've felt like are the hardest parts. And maybe you will relate to this once you start silence and solitude, because I feel like this is just something that I'm telling you, like, look out for these things. You might have this rushing feeling of like, I need to do more, I need to do more, I'm not being productive. You might have this noise in your head or distractions externally of like information overload. And then you may have fear. You may have fear of confronting your emotions. And all of that is perfectly normal to experience when you are doing something for the first time, when you are starting this phenomenon, this crazy spiritual practice that kind of seems like foreign in our world today, because we truly have the ability to be alone, but we truly have the ability to be by ourselves, but distracted 24/7 by electronics or whatever it may be. But here's the good part, right? And so to kind of go back to like my breakup when I started spending this intentional time in silence and with the Lord, this is kind of how I structured it. So every morning I would wake up, I would sit down, and I don't remember exactly what order I did this in all the time. I think it just really depended on the day, but I think I would read a few verses and then I would pray. And then after my prayer, I would just be silent, and any thoughts that would come to mind that may have been like, oh, what am I going to eat for breakfast or where am I going to go to lunch, I would just like write those down or just just let them drift off like a wave, and not really pay too much attention to them because I was focused on like, okay, what is the Lord going to tell me? And I go into this on another episode of like the Lord, how to listen and hear the Lord. And I talk about silence and solitude then. So I'm not going to really touch on that so much right now. But anyway, so I would sit in silence, and then after that, maybe I would journal what I heard, or I would just journal how I was feeling. And so there really doesn't have to be like a specific order to do this in, but overall, what you should do is find a quiet space, whether that's inside your bedroom or, maybe outside in the early morning, in a park, somewhere that's just peaceful, serene, as peaceful as it can get, right? And of course, like every season is going to be different. Now that I'm married, I'm realizing like, oh, it's kind of a little bit harder to get alone. I can't just, we have a one bedroom apartment. And so there's not a lot of room to go, right? And so I'm like in the living room and I just tell my husband like, "Okay, I'm going to go out here for a little bit. I'll be done in this amount of time." Just so we know like give each other space while we're having this time. But in every season it's different. You may have kids, you may have roommates, and so it's a little bit harder to get away, but um this is just an outline. This is just a guideline, and just try to do it to the best of your ability. But yeah, find a quiet space. Center yourself in like your body. Maybe your heart rate is really high. So take a few deep breaths. You can breathe slowly, like inhale for 5 seconds and then exhale for 5 seconds. Um, and then something that you could also do if you want to, whether you just read the Bible before that or whether you're just waking up, is just acknowledging that the Lord is with you, just thanking Him for being with you today. And um, yeah, and just saying, like, Lord, like, I'm here to listen. I'm here to just be in your presence and just kind of acknowledging that, like, putting it into words. And now, any distractions that may come, like I said, just kind of brush them off. Like, gently just return to your breath, to the Lord. Sometimes I like to have like this mental picture because I feel like it helps me to focus on the Lord. So maybe I'll envision me in the ocean and the Lord is like this bright light just shining over me. And so I try to use like these visualization um methods to help me like focus instead of drifting off to all these other thoughts of what am I going to do today. And so maybe if you're like a visual learner or that's something that helps you, that would be beneficial, but that's something that I've done. And then what I would do next is notice any emotions that come up within you. Are you feeling angry? Are you feeling tired? Are you feeling joyful, peaceful? Like, what is it that you're feeling? And just kind of name them. And there's actually this journal that's called the Overcomers Journal, where they kind of have like this framework of different emotions that you could be feeling, and you can like circle them and just like explain what you're feeling. And I feel like that's kind of helpful if you have a list of emotions and then you can name them from the list. I feel like that's nice if you don't really know what you're feeling or don't know how to put it into words. So yeah, I'll just notice and name any emotions I'm feeling, and just give God any feelings that I'm experiencing. And so something in the breakup that I liked doing was I would tell the Lord, like, okay, Lord, I'm really struggling with this breakup. I really want to get back together with Christopher. However, I know that you know what's best for me. And so I'm going to trust you and trust the outcome. So I pray if it is in your will that you will bring us back together. But when you do bring us back together, we don't have to do any work to see each other. We just run into each other. It just happens. And so I would pray things like that. And maybe one day I would wake up and I'd say, Lord, like I'm feeling peaceful. Like, thank you for this emotion. Thank you for this feeling. Thank you for helping me yesterday when I was feeling really sad. And so every day it's a little bit different, but I feel like a good framework to have is kind of to go in and out of speaking words, to go in and out of this silence. So that's what I would do. It doesn't have to be like this It doesn't have to be this hard and fast rule of like spend 5 minutes in silence, then pray, then do this. I would just kind of go with the flow. So I'd, close my eyes. I would give God my feelings. I would give him my desires, and then I would end in giving him my trust. And maybe I'd pause between each of those segments and take like a few minutes in between. Maybe towards the end, I would take 5 minutes where I wouldn't say a word. Any thoughts that came to my mind, I would just let them pass like a wave, just going through me. And if anything kind of stuck with me that I felt like the Lord might be telling me to do or imprinting on my heart, maybe He was nudging me to read a specific scripture or to reach out to a particular person, that's when I would write stuff down. Specifically, an example that happened the other day, I was sitting in silence and I was sitting with the Lord and I was praying for my friend. And during each line of this prayer that I had, I would take a few minutes to pause, and I had a word that came up to mind, and so I wrote it down, and later, after I was done with this prayer, I looked up this word, because it wasn't in English, and it was something that I felt like I should tell my friend, so I told her. Anyway, it resonated with her, and that was pretty cool, right? And so if I didn't have that moment where I was, like, taking time to, like, listen after I said something instead of just speaking, like, the Lord could have told me, sure, but I just feel like it's nice we're giving him that opportunity, just like we would be talking to a friend where you pause, you let them say something. And maybe they don't say anything back, maybe they just let you finish talking, but I feel like it's that way with the Lord too, where we need to pause, we need to allow the Lord to speak to us, you know? So that's going back to that podcast episode I did on, listening to the Lord. But that's what I would do during my breakup. That's pretty much the framework I would have. And like I said, my days were different. I one day would wake up and I would journal, I would read my Bible, and then I would sit in silence for 10 minutes, and then I would finish in prayer for 5 minutes, or it would be in the complete opposite order. And so it doesn't have to be like this very specific way. I feel like just going with the flow of things and doing what feels right for you. I feel like everyone is very different, and so can maybe you are not someone who can read first thing in the morning because your eyes are, like, closed shut, and so you're like, "Okay, you know what? I'm gonna pray, and I'm gonna read my Bible later, or I'm gonna do it a different time in the week." And so I feel like, the silence and solitude is overall just a good thing that you can do wherever you are. It doesn't have to be exactly first thing when you wake up in the morning. I just happen to like that because I feel like it starts my day off very well. But I've found that throughout the day, during my lunch break, or, if I have a few moments, not going on my phone is really beneficial, not taking those few minutes to scroll, but instead to just like take a few deep breaths, center myself. It really isn't a profound practice. Like, well, it is profound, but it's nothing like new under the sun. Like, it's very simple, is what I'm trying to say. It's not rocket science. Like, it seems hard, but it is very simple. And so it may not be easy, but it's simple. There we go. So, yeah, I feel like some really cool things that I've seen from it, well, going back to earlier, the Lord has spoke to me when I've made time for silence and solitude. Another really cool thing is I'm more creative when I spend time in silence, and I have so much more clarity, whether it's for podcast ideas or for decisions I have to make in life. I just feel this clarity. And I don't have these profound experiences every single time I sit with the Lord. Every time I quiet my thoughts, I'm not hearing Him speak to me in like these bold ways. And I feel like that's something that we maybe can expect when we go into this. And then we come out and we're like, well, that wasn't really profound. I don't want to do that again. When it's not meant to be this crazy, like loud thing every time. It's meant to be this slow burn of like every day you spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and you spend time with the Lord, and it adds up. And as it's adding up, you're becoming more and more like Jesus. You're becoming more filled with patience, filled with joy, peace. And maybe you're praying about this decision that you need to make. Maybe it's whether you get back together or not with your ex, or maybe it's whether to date this person, whether your singleness has come to an end, right? And maybe you're not hearing a direct answer the weeks or maybe months that you're sitting with the Lord. But over time, your heart starts to kind of align with Him and you start to feel this clarity of, you know what? I feel really good about this decision. And you're not so confused anymore. And so that's something that I've noticed. It's not these loud moments always with God. It's this like slow burn of day after day, time after time. The more we build this connection and intimacy with Him, the more we can learn to make decisions that are aligned with his will. And so, yeah, those are really like the benefits that I found from silence and solitude. Obviously, there's probably so much more that I've seen from my life. And to reiterate, I am not perfect and I have not done this every single day since my breakup. I went through my breakup at the end of 2023, now it's 2025. And I have been through different seasons. When I got engaged specifically, I was planning for a wedding and my mind had wedding things 24/7 on it. Let me tell you, I was very stressed and not at all restful because I don't feel like I prioritized my time with the Lord as much. Now, I went through different days, different weeks where I was better. And, and when I say better, I don't mean like, oh, I was like better at being a Christian that week. I just mean like for my soul felt more well rested when I would spend time with God, intentional time with God versus just waking up and getting straight to like wedding planning or straight to working out or work or whatever it was. Anyway, and then I kind of carried that on in marriage. I got married and it's a really exciting time. You're waking up with your husband and you're, just having like a little sleepover every day. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, just so you know, but I went through this time where everything was so exciting where I kind of put God on the back burner of like, wow, like I love being married and I love making breakfast for my husband and making coffee and waking up together. And I slept in. I didn't wake up as early to spend time with the Lord. And so I kind of lost um I don't know, just like a routine of it. And so the past few months, I've been getting back into a routine. Let's see, I've been married for almost 7 months now, but the past few months I've been getting back into a routine of like every single morning spending time with the Lord. But some days are better than others, and I'm not perfect, and every season is going to bring on new challenges and new experiences. Um, so yeah, it's not a one size fits all, and I'm definitely not here to force you to do anything. In fact, this isn't even a command in the Bible. Oh, something that I wanted to mention is, speaking of the Bible, if we think we don't need silence and solitude, we are quite wrong, because Jesus modeled this so often, in Luke 5:16, in Mark 1:35, if you want to go check those out. It talks about how Jesus withdrew to be alone with God. He withdrew from the crowd and he was in high demand. Like everyone wanted to be with him and wanted him to heal them and pray for them. But he knew that he needed that time to like fill up his cup, right? So he could pour into others. And so it's not selfish. I think it's important to find the balance between being selfless and then also making time to be with the Lord. I feel like a perfect example is like having a child. I don't have a child, but having a child is a very selfless act of like your mornings are spent taking care of the child, your days, your nights during the night. And so maybe you're not having enough time to be alone with the Lord, but you're finding different ways to do that. And it's like during that season, your time alone with God looks like, while you're feeding the baby, that's when you are just taking things in and sitting down and being silent and being still for a little bit. Anyway, but if we think that we don't need silence and solitude, we are quite mistaken, because Jesus needed that. And, well, he's Jesus. So, like, obviously we need it as well. Although it's not a commandment that we need to spend this certain amount of time every day with God, it's definitely something that really is beneficial for our spiritual life. And throughout all the noise of this world, and not even just like worldly noise of like toxic things that are going on, whether it's in like pop culture or whatever it is, but even just like in the Christian community, so going to so many Bible studies and being a part of youth groups and all the things like that's great. But at the same time, you need your own relationship with the Lord. And I feel like that's what took me a while to learn. I needed to be alone with the Lord. And maybe you also have something to say. Maybe you're also feeling like, okay, well, I'm extroverted. Like that's a gift the Lord has given me. So I'm not going to spend time like in silence all the time if I want to go serve people and I want to go help people. Like yes, that is great. But at the same time, Jesus needed to retreat so that he could fill up his cup to then go help people. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if Jesus was an introvert or extrovert, but he maybe had the perfect balance of the two of like, okay, I'm going to heal these people and then I'm going to go to the woods and fast and be with the Lord and just be in peace, right? So, anyway, with all of that being said, though, I hope that maybe you can try out this practice for yourself. And if you want more information on this, if you want to go through like a 4-week study on how to practice silence and solitude, I will put the link down below for the Practicing the Way course where you can do that yourself. But yeah, overall, I just hope you can get in some silence this week, get in solitude, and understand that when we remove ourselves from the world, when we take some time to go encounter our thoughts, encounter our emotions, and encounter the Lord, that is when we can feel this deep peace, no matter what's going on in the world. Like if there's chaos and there's, there's horrible stuff happening in the world, which there always is, but we have this like safe place to retreat to. I feel like that's just, so beautiful. Yeah. But with all that being said, I hope that you could benefit from this at all. If you have any questions, as always, let me know down below. And if you did like today's episode, make sure to like and follow the podcast for more. Subscribe if you're on YouTube. But I hope we have a wonderful week ahead of us. And if it's not so wonderful, that's okay too. I just pray that we can bring those emotions and those difficulties to the Lord, and no matter what kind of day we're having, we just continuously go to the Lord instead of going to phones or unhealthy things first. So, yeah, but I love you guys, and I hope we can continue to create a life we love together. Have a great day. Bye bye.